Is that how we start this? I just click the button.
I mean, I sit in the passenger seat on this deal.
And we don't have music, so
no music. What?
Scott, could you scat the theme song for us today?
I don't know about that.
Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. Thank you so much for joining us today on a hot and sweaty, sunny Friday. We are in the dog days of summer, I guess. This is the part of the year that I don't know if I like it the least, but I don't like it very much. Because just a few months ago, we had that giant winter storm for which my trees are still dropping limbs, and that was also miserable. So I think I'd rather be hot than cold, Scott, but I think you're the opposite, right?
Yeah, I'll say it. This is the worst part of the year. Like, it's this or, January is not great. February can kind of suck, but at least in January and February, you don't get sweaty walking to your car, right? No,
but you might lose a toe from like.
I'll take it. I have 9. I got 9 others.
All right,
late July, August, you're wanting to look forward to football season, but like it's not here yet.
The other thing is like you really can't enjoy a football game until like October because it's still hot, right?
If you're a super nerdy political junkie, August at the national level, they take the August recess. The August recess is terrible because everybody goes and has town halls in their home districts, which rather than creating an opportunity for like civil discourse, it ends up being a lot of like shouting about various things and like, nothing gets done. And people always are like, they're taking a week off or a month off from their job. I don't get to do that. So politically, it's a sucky time. It's 105 degrees. It's too hot to grill, but it's also too hot to cook in the kitchen. So, I guess if you have a pool, it's a good time. But
right, just raw carrots. Right,
I'm not fancy enough for a pool. So
smoothies every day. That's what you need. Just smoothies. Well, and new this year with the August recess of Congress is the opportunity for town halls and COVID. Right, like I guess it's not new this year. We had it last year, but they didn't have a lot of them because last year was new and scary, and everyone heeded the guidance of public health officials. And this year, folks are mad about it. So, roughly half of us are vaccinated. And so we likely be okay, but the other half is not, and they are not okay. And we're not going to go into a standard COVID update because I assume that our listeners know that things are getting worse, right? Just that's the crawl at the bottom of the TV going around. Things are getting worse. Cases are going up. I haven't even looked today, but I'm assuming it's nearing 2,000 cases diagnosed today. It's gone up dramatically every day.
1,800, something like that.
I was going to guess 1,800. Yeah. So things are getting worse. But let's talk about COVID, but in a different way. Let's talk about the potential impacts of it on Oklahoma politics. Maybe not national stuff because that's a whole different ballgame, but this week, we saw what in my opinion was a very misguided post by the governor's social media team, a photo of him eating caviar while in Azerbaijan.
Just like a regular American.
I was like, okay, Azerbaijan, fine. But do you think that maybe caviar might not resonate well with the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association or something? It just seemed a little bizarre to me. And in the midst of the spike going on, right? And so the media is clamoring to get a statement from him or his office, and all they've gotten is, no comment or more likely no emergency order. Like, just be responsible, do the right thing. I'm going to have some more cash.
But he won't say what the right thing is. He says, do the right thing, but it's a personal choice to get the vaccine. He says there's no plans to declare a public health emergency. And then they point anybody who asks to the health department for further answers to questions who haven't released a statement in like 3 weeks. Freaking Asa freaking Hutchinson, okay, who's not exactly a rhino, Republican in name only.
The governor
governor
of
of
Arkansas.
Arkansas,
Mhm.
has declared a public health emergency in Arkansas and is going on a listening tour around the state to encourage people to get vaccinated. And apparently is going to call a special session of their legislature so they can come back and undo the law preventing municipalities and school districts from enacting mask mandates in Arkansas.
I
Right?
didn't see that part.
Yeah, like they're calling a special session of the legislature to undo the batshit crazy law that they signed in the spring session, which, by the way, everybody told him was a crazy thing to do, and he did it. And our governor is eating very fancy fish eggs on the other side of the world,
Right.
and won't acknowledge that COVID is still a thing. You asking like you know what the politics are. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I believe, as I think many people do, that Governor Stitt intends to run for president. I think he's not going to impose a public health emergency because imposing a public health emergency would allow Tulsa and Oklahoma City school districts to require masks in their classrooms, which they're not allowed to do currently, and they can only do that if the governor declares a public health emergency. And the governor doesn't want the flack from the two biggest public school districts in the country, in the state, declaring that kids have to wear masks. He doesn't want that political fallout. But the flip side of that is going to be that because there's not a public health emergency in place, hospitals can't do several of the things that they did last year to prepare for the winter COVID surge in terms of staffing, in terms of expanding bed capacity, ICU capacity. Like there's really strict laws governing what hospitals can and can't do. And some of those laws are not enforced during a time of a public health emergency. So, not a lawyer, not anything really, but like,
you are a doctor.
I mean,
That's relevant.
Yeah, it feels less so some days, but, it unless I'm missing something, what's happening is we're crippling the public health response for an explicit political, what the governor perceives as an explicit political victory. I don't know if it's going to turn out that way for him or not. I know that there's a lot of people in the hospital. I know that the vast majority of them are unvaccinated. I know that there are people that are being intubated in the hospital asking for the vaccine as they're being intubated and going on the ventilator. When that happens, it's too late. I helped staff the COVID unit for a little while at my institution in the winter surge, and I'm telling patients, if it gets as bad as it was and I have to go back to the hospital, I don't want to see you there. I love seeing you in clinic. I don't want to see you in the hospital.
Right.
That is kind of helping some people get over the line. I don't know. I'm drifting away from politics here. I'm just having like stream of consciousness because this is all I think about. But
and you're doing it because this is personal and it's been traumatic, right? It is for me, like just you describing things about being in the ICU and being intubated certainly brings back vivid images I have of my own mother, right? Who was there, who we kept hoping would get better, and eventually died, right? Like it was, that was not that long ago, folks. It was 7 months ago. And I mean, we talk about it every couple of days, right? My dad and I talked about it last night. Like this is still a very real reality. And sadly, we are going to see more people die, right? Yes, it is, many older folks are vaccinated, but a lot of younger folks are not. And many of them are going to die too, right? I don't know if we want to draw a line somewhere, but it feels like we're not drawing a line at how many deaths are okay. And so as we near 750,000 Americans, including several hundred children, right? It's terrifying. So speaking of children and COVID and local control, and what hospitals and schools can and cannot do, we have a guest with us today, Scott, who's been smiling at us and cringing at some things, as we all have, right? And
the guests cringe a lot when I talk. I'm used to it.
The cringing will continue until morale improves. Anyway, joining us is Amanda Ewing from OEA. Hello, Amanda.
Hi.
Amanda, is your official title something about government relations?
My official title is Associate Executive Director of Legislative and Political Organizing.
Holy cow, that's a bureaucratic masterpiece. That's wonderful. Um, well, congratulations on all of those words that are your title. Tell us a little bit about what you do and I will say the Oklahoma Education Association, which is um, we won't call them a union, the membership organization for educators in our state. Tell us a little bit about what you do there.
So, yeah, OEA is the professional organization for educators and support professionals working in public schools. And I head up our legislative and political efforts. So I'm the chief lobbyist at the state capitol during legislative sessions, trying to figure out our strategy for passing good bills supporting public ed and defeating the many, many bad ones. And then I also work on our electoral strategies. So we're trying to, find good candidates to run for office and helping public ed supporters in both parties get elected, trying to do everything we can to make it a little easier to get to 51 when you need 51 votes to pass a good bill in the House.
Right. Although increasingly they need 60 or 75 or something. But I will speak to the power of educators in Oklahoma that during every election and once they're sworn into office, the number of state legislators that have either been teachers themselves, are married to a teacher, or are like the child of a teacher, right? Like everyone will tout that. My mother was a teacher, my grandmother's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, I was a teacher. Because the politicians know this is a constituency that matters in our state. And in theory, we should listen to them and make sure that they're happy, although that doesn't always happen.
Right. I mean, we have over 20 legislators in the House and Senate right now who were or are educators. So, not like you said, not to mention the ones who are married to or related to. I mean, if you ask them, they all say they support public ed. When it comes down to votes, sometimes it can be a little different.
That's right. Let's. So I want to talk through a few things as it relates to education, and I think maybe the way to do it is chronologically. So, school starts here in a few weeks. So we'll talk about the predicament that schools may find themselves in, and then we'll talk about interim studies, which will happen later this fall. And then we can talk about loft and some other things. So let's start. So as we said at the top of the show, right? There's no emergency declaration in place, so that means that hospitals can't do certain things, as Scott mentioned. It also means that schools can't do certain things, like require masks. I have heard from like my children's teachers, right, and principals that they are already trying to lay the groundwork to say, listen, we can't do it, but if the governor would issue a thing, it'll be immediate, right? Like we've got the plan written. We don't have to make it up. We just can't do it yet, which I think bespeaks a desire to protect children. Call me crazy. What do you hear from your side? What do you know about how teachers are feeling going into this fall?
I mean, I think there's a lot of fear and frustration, for all that we talk about the need for local control in Oklahoma. I mean, that's, you hear that at the Capitol every day. Local districts are not being allowed to make their own decisions on this sort of thing. So a school district can't decide, community spread is increasing significantly in our area, so let's mask up for a few weeks until we get past this. So I think folks are afraid. School districts, I got an email from my son's high school today saying the same thing, saying if there's an emergency order, mask will be mandatory for everybody immediately. But until then, we just strongly encourage them. And I think districts are trying to figure out, are there any ways we can, maybe incentivize students to and staff to wear them? Are there, can you have a policy where everybody wears a mask unless a parent has come and filled out a form to opt their student out of wearing a mask? That same law that, made the mask requirements also said you can't have any policy requiring vaccinations. So it's tricky. And from what I hear, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of folks trying to figure out how can we go back to school safely.
Was that law about not requiring vaccinations, was that specific to COVID vaccinations, or does that roll back any requirements for vaccine, like other, like chicken pox and measles and all that stuff?
It was Senate Bill 658, and it's specific to COVID. It says you can't have a COVID vaccination. You also can't have a mask policy that only applies to unvaccinated students who don't have the COVID vaccination.
Yeah, it's like they read the public health guidance for best practices in this situation and then ran as far as they could in the opposite direction. Like it's hard to imagine a worse bill right now. You know, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I have much to add. You know, I have parents are asking me every day, like, hey, Dr. Melson, what do you think about sending our kids back to school or sending our kids to daycare? And it's very difficult. I say, I think we can feel confident about several things. Like one, I think we can feel confident that COVID, generally the Delta variant specifically, is very contagious. Two, I think we can feel confident that masking, particularly if it's practiced by the majority of people in a building, does mitigate spread to like a meaningful degree. Three, if your kiddo is in school and they don't have the vaccine, either because you choose not to get it for them or because they're not old enough to get it, I think that their risk of contracting the disease is probably pretty high. And four, most kids who get COVID don't get that sick. That is a factual statement. However, it is also factual that there is some subset that we can't predict who can get very sick. And you don't know who falls into what group, and so it's really difficult to say you should, I think this is a situation that families have to make the decision that they think is best for their family in the realm of what's possible for their family. I'm certainly encouraging all of my patients and their kids to, if they haven't been working on masking already, to start working on masking now, so that it's kind of an easy thing to do when they start school. And unless something changes, I think that's the best we can do, unfortunately. Amanda, do you guys, and by you guys, I mean OEA, what are you watching? We're in the political off season. The House approved, I think, 117 interim studies. Pro Tem Treat approved 71. All the interim studies that were requested in the Senate. What are you guys watching? What's any interim studies that are of particular interest for the education community?
Yeah, there are a lot of interim studies that focus on education, and there are a few that we're specifically working with legislators to help make happen. There's a study that Representative Pay is doing on civics education that we're working on. There's one that Representative Johns and Talley in the House have requested that they're doing, that's on the low wages that our education support professionals in our schools make. So our bus drivers, cafeteria workers, office workers, those folks often work at minimum wage. If the school shuts down for a day, then they don't get paid. And so we're really trying to kind of highlight and bring more of a focus on the need to increase wages for our support professionals with that one. And then we're working with Representative Fricks on a study about defined benefit pensions. Teachers, after a lifetime of public service, get a pension, and it's not anything crazy. It's like, $1,600 a month, but you get that, guaranteed for the rest of your life. And so we're going to look at the economic benefit that provides for our communities, because, all of that money goes back into local businesses. Generally, it's paying for medications at the pharmacy and food at the grocery store. And we really, frankly, expect next session to see some big threats to educators' pensions. And so we're trying to kind of get ahead of things by focusing on how important pensions are.
What are the things you see, in terms, I agree with you about threats to pensions, but would you maybe expand on that a little bit? What do you guys see coming down the pike?
So, with respect to to that particular issue, we saw a bill last year introduced that said, let's move all new teachers into defined contribution retirement systems. So instead of that guaranteed monthly payment for the rest of your life, you save money throughout your career. And when you retire, you have that pot of money to live off of until it runs out. And when it runs out, you're just out of luck. We don't.
Would you say another word for that is private retirement accounts, privatization of the retirement system, as opposed to the pension system that we've had? This has been a big deal at multiple levels of government for years. Yeah,
I would say that's, essentially what's happening. And the problem is there's a whole lot of money to have there, right? I mean, our teachers' retirement system has about $13 billion in it right now. So there are a lot of folks that say, wow, that's money that we could be investing. We could be trying to make a profit off of. There are fees to be had if you're managing it. And so if you can get, future folks to move into these, kind of private 401k type plans, it's not going to work out in the best interest of the educator, but there's a lot of money to be made for a lot of people.
Funny how that influences things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all a really good summary. Amanda, are there any other interim studies that you think our listeners should pay attention to?
Yeah, definitely. There are a couple on education management organizations and charter school sponsors. I think those are trying to get at kind of the laws surrounding virtual schools, and specifically, Epic is a school that's been in the news a ton in recent years for potential fraud. And I really think that those interim studies could shed some light on, how these entities are doing what they're doing and what laws need to change to fix it. There's also a study on tax credit vouchers. The legislature made a huge expansion of these tax credits this past session to incentivize folks to donate their money to private schools. Representative Eccles, who shepherded that bill through, has asked for an interim study on it. I'm not really sure what he plans to study at this point, but it's a little concerning to me because it could highlight an intention to expand that program even further next year.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So we already passed the law, but now we're going to study it. Let's vote first and ask questions later.
Yeah.
That seems like not the way to govern. But you're right. And to be fair, I think the term interim studies is a bit of a misnomer sometimes, because they are typically presentations, right? And in my opinion, interim studies across the board vary in their studiousness, right? Like they have study in the name, but sometimes it's really like a dog and pony show, because the legislators who request them get to basically, by and large, pick who comes to speak, right? I think they may have to run it by a committee chair, but you can kind of line up the guests who are speaking about an issue. And in some cases, it's often because an organization or an individual requested a study as a way to lift up an issue and get some information and some discussion and awareness of an issue, right? So when I was working in the HIV community, we worked with a state legislator to have an interim study about the health education mandates from the State Department of Education as it relates to HIV, and about updating them. And we just tried running a bill one year and it didn't go anywhere. And so we realized, we probably need to do some education with lawmakers first and kind of bring it up. Now, they don't all come, right? Like there was just really 2 that were there, but it at least kind of puts it out there so folks are aware of like, oh, okay, these folks are going through the process or doing the steps to get to the end of, getting some legislation passed.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that they're often just presentations rather than actual studies. I've rarely seen an interim study where, 2 sides of an issue are presented. It's real often just going to be one side. I think also they can sometimes be used as cop-outs for folks who maybe don't want to introduce a bill on a topic, maybe, don't want to have to tell a constituent no, but they'll say, how about we do an interim study on that, in the interim instead. But then, sometimes they are legit. If you can get, committee members there. Maybe you can get the press to cover your study. Maybe, you can, if you really are working it, then it can be the, initial steps towards introducing a law and ultimately passing it.
Yeah. I find them particularly helpful when they deal with like studying or estimating the cost of a certain program or the benefit of something. I mean, we have, groups like Loft, right? And advisory committees that are supposed to do this, but sometimes this is a good time to do it, to be like, okay, well, if we ran a bill about this, what would it actually cost? And so it's a very formal process of doing your research. So I think, like many things in government, when used properly, can be very helpful and powerful. All right. Well, this has all been really great. Amanda, it's great to have you here. We're going to keep talking about some other things. You are welcome to stick around and chime in as you feel compelled to do. But I want to take a pivot away from education and talk about some new appointees the governor has made this week. I guess it's been 2 weeks since our last episode. We didn't acknowledge that at the top of the show, but it's been 2 weeks, listeners. Welcome back. We have a new attorney general. He does not yet have theme music on our show. So far, that's only Scott Pruitt. General Hunter didn't get any theme music, but we do have a new AG. His name is John O'Connor, and his appointment was not without a bit of, not consternation, but like discussion on Twitter. That's what it was. It was not without discussion on Twitter. Scott, do you know anything about Attorney General O'Connor?
Yeah. So he's been a lawyer for like 30 years. He's been in practice here in Oklahoma. He's worked on a variety of issues. I think he's most well known for being nominated for a federal district judgeship by President Trump. He did not get confirmed by the Senate. He withdrew his name from consideration after being deemed not qualified for a federal judgeship by the American Bar Association, which is a distinction that's not often conferred on people, but happened a few times during the last presidency. So I don't work with the American Bar Association to determine who is and is not qualified to be a federal judge, but it seems like that's a big deal. The other thing.
I heard that there's only been 5 people who have ever been nominated and did not get the nod from the Bar Association.
And there's been more than like 10 nominees total, right? Like there's been like a lot of judges. So
yeah. Right.
So that's, that's not great. His first, I guess not his first official act, but I think one of his major first official acts was filing a brief with the Supreme Court, asking and advocating that they overturn Roe v. Wade. This is interesting because, and Amanda, you are a lawyer by training, right? Yeah. So if I'm like 100% wrong on anything I'm about to say, please jump in and tell me. But like the abortion stuff is interesting because really over the last I don't know, I guess like 20 years or so, the last couple of decades, when opponents of legalized abortion have tried to kind of chip away at Roe, they very rarely, if ever, like actually ask the court to overturn it. Like the strategy has been, allow states to impose requirements on doctors and requirements on clinics or requirements on women, like basically allow states to create this like multiple layers of like barriers that women, doctors, clinics have to go through, so that eventually it becomes abortion may be legal, but it's de facto impossible to access because there are so many barriers. Like that's been the legal strategy to try and craft laws that the court will uphold as not like they don't violate Roe, but they also like make it harder to get abortions as a practical matter. This year, I think it's Mississippi, Mississippi has filed an express challenge to Roe. There are multiple other attorneys general who have filed briefs specifically asking the court to overturn Roe. There was an amicus brief that was, I think it's an amicus. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what that word means. There was an amicus brief that was filed by a bunch of legislators explicitly asking for friend of the court brief. There you go. Amicable. That makes so much sense.
Is that you're welcome? I want listeners to know that came from me, not from the attorney.
Yeah.
This is one of the 3 Latin phrases I'm aware of.
Yeah. No, but like this is new. Like having like legislators, organizations, states, attorneys general, like specifically saying to the court, our goal here is overturning Roe is a new and rather like bold approach. I assume that's because of the makeup of the court now is more conservative than it has been probably in most of our lifetimes. At least since I've been paying attention to Supreme Court politics. So, for like the last 10, 15 years. Yeah, so we're talking about the AG, but that's my take is that, the American Bar Association said like, oh, not this guy in terms of a judgeship. But Governor Stitt said he is exactly what we need. So, the other thing is he's committed to trying to overturn McGirt, which we talked a lot about on the show. Again, as I've said, I don't know what's going to happen, but the Supreme Court is often reluctant to overrule a case that they themselves decided very recently. So I don't know how much luck they're going to have with McGirt. But anyway.
Yeah, I think so. I thought his appointment was interesting. And on the one hand, he feels like exactly who we expected that the governor would appoint, right? Especially when it comes to things like Roe and McGirt and those cases. On the other hand, like reading through his bio and one of the numerous news stories about him, on paper, he sounds very qualified. But then there's this weird deal with the American Bar Association not recommending him. And it sounds like it stemmed from his time at the Oklahoma State Insurance Department, and that there was some issues there with let me phrase it here. This is from a non-doc article. So the chairman of the committee at the ABA didn't cite specific examples, but he wrote a letter outlining concerns about O'Connor's employment at the Oklahoma Insurance Department and a pair of complaints filed against him in 1994 and 2012, that's a long time apart. And so I don't know what those concerns were. I haven't read through that, but you got to feel like it had to be something pretty gnarly for them to not endorse him. And the fact that basically prevented him from being considered for that appointment. That's a big deal. Now, obviously being a judge is different than being a chief prosecutor, right? Those are very different roles in the legal system. I know a lot of attorneys, most of them would not make great judicial members, right? Like Amanda's laughing. I assume that's the same for you. We're not going to evaluate your judicial jurisprudence, but I think there's a lot of good attorneys that would be terrible judges. And there's some judges that are better as judges and not great attorneys. Like it's a different skill set, I think. And this goes back to an early episode we had, Scott, where we learned that special judges don't even have to go to law school.
I can be a judge.
Waiting for my appointment here. That's right.
Yeah, I can be a judge. I can totally be a judge.
I look great in a black robe. So that's a moo-moo for the modern man. That's right. And so I would be excited. Anyway, I guess we'll see how this plays out. He has already said that he plans to run for election or re-election next fall, which means, he's going to be in office for just a few months. He's got to try to make a name for himself and then run on that name next year. But also Gittner Drummond.
Yeah.
Who's possibly the best name.
The Gittner's back.
Just who among us can take credit that our name sounds like a weather term, right? A man-made weather term. Anyway, Gittner Drummond, who is an attorney and narrowly lost the Republican primary to Mike Hunter 4 years ago, or in 2018. And so he has already announced his campaign for Attorney General as well. And so, there's in some cases, there is the incumbent momentum, right? That incumbents for office are often reelected just based on name recognition and incumbency status. But I think if I remember what Nate Silver has said, that does not extend to people who have been appointed to their office. Of course, Nate would be talking about like congressional seats, not state attorney general of Oklahoma. And so we'll see what happens. I might vote for Drummond based on name alone. So I can say, like, the Gittner.
You can't vote in a Republican primary.
I could change my registration from independent to Republican.
You could. That's
there's
true.
There's not much happening in the independent primaries because there's not one. It's a very boring time.
Yeah. So that's man, I'm depressed now.
Cheer up, Scott. We've got a new Supreme Court justice as well here in Oklahoma.
We do. She was. I don't know if elevated is the correct. Would elevated be the correct term? Because she was previously on the Court of Criminal Appeals, right?
Well, she's still appointed. Oh, you mean as opposed to promoted?
Yeah. Well, like because the Court of Criminal Appeals is the other highest court in Oklahoma, right. And isn't the Court of Criminal Appeals the highest court in Oklahoma for criminal cases?
Yeah, they're like parallel.
Yeah,
sister courts.
So she wasn't promoted. She was transferred, right?
Well, she was. Yeah, that's why she was.
Amanda, is it a promotion or is this a lateral move?
I mean, it feels like a promotion still. I mean, even if they are technically, parallel, it's the
just because it has the word supreme in it.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's supreme.
Exactly.
Right.
I've never been supreme anything.
That's true. I agree. You've not.
I would one day like to have a job that has supreme in the title.
Well, now we're getting close to a supreme leader, which is a whole different conversation.
Well, there's nothing in the medical field that has supreme. I'll have to I don't know.
Really?
I don't think so.
Maybe you could. At some point, you can just start inventing titles. That's the dream, right? Is to have a position where you can just make up a title. You were going to be the assistant to the regional manager, right?
Yeah, right. Or just say, start a company. People come in and say, so you're the CEO. No, I'm the supreme.
That's right.
That's it. You just call me. That's my whole title, the Supreme.
I was listening to a podcast this week about. It's called "Brought to You By." It's a really great podcast from Business Insider. There's an episode about Big Ass Fans, the company that's called Big Ass Fans.
Oh, they make great fans.
They do. That was not the original name, and so he was interviewing the owner, and he said, "That's right. I am the Chief Big Ass." That's what it says on my business cards.
That's delightful.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense, right? If you're going to lean in. Some really funny stories about like when they'd send out mailers in like the newspaper and stuff, and people would call and yell at them because like, why are you putting this profanity in my mailbox? And he's like, well, I didn't put it there. But a lot of folks had strong feelings about the name of a fan company that involves a donkey. So anyway, back to the Supreme Court Justice, Dana Kuhn, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. So yeah, she's been the presiding judge for the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is like the Chief Justice, I think, for the last year. And from everything I've read about her, seems also very qualified, right? And so we're going to this means now that Governor Stitt has appointed 4 or 5 justices, but I think
it gives him a majority.
Does it with this one, or is it one more?
I thought it was this one.
I think there's a chance that he's appointed 3. I think this is the 4th, but I think so maybe he's one shy of a majority, but his term's not over, and there's always rumors because some of our justices are pretty up there in years. So there's a chance that Governor Stitt could appoint a majority of our state Supreme Court, which I don't know. Separation of powers seems like one governor should not be allowed to appoint more than half the court. Scott, stop listening. But that's my opinion.
No, I'm just. I mean, I don't disagree. But like, to the victor go the spoils, right? I mean, that's the.
Yeah, sure, but that shouldn't be a spoil that's allowed. That's what I'm saying.
You're suggesting
you can appoint up to 4, but no more. You don't get to appoint a whole majority.
I mean, or we could move to a system where judges are selected by lawyers and other judges who actually can evaluate their credentials on the merits and their experience, as opposed to making the legal system into a tool of partisan warfare at every level of government.
Crazy talk.
Right.
Crazy talk.
I mean, we've talked about this before. It's been a couple of years, so I guess I can go off on the rant. But like, I mean, it is just, I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. Like, we elect judges. Like, that's nuts that we elect judges. You know,
elect a lot of things.
I mean, that's true, but like
court clerk,
which is just kind of weird, tbh. But I mean, I hear you. Like, I wish it wasn't the case that, like, I mean, the same thing happens at the Supreme Court, right? Like, President Trump was in office for 4 years, impeached twice, and appointed 30% of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, some of that was just bad luck for the other side, right? Like, it's just timing that he happened to be the one in office when RBG died. Like, it, that's just the way it goes.
He happened to be the one in office when the Senate Majority Leader held a seat open for 9 months so that he could appoint one.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing was intentional. The other thing is just dumb luck. All right, man. Scott, anything else you want to talk about today?
No, please. If you're not vaccinated, for the love, please get your shot. If there's people in your family that aren't vaccinated, please encourage them to get their shot. I will also say, I have started testing people a lot more than I had been in the past couple of months. Our disease prevalence had gotten low enough that we weren't testing quite as frequently. If you have symptoms that can be consistent with coronavirus, this includes either infection with wild type virus, which is, the fever, fatigue, body aches, or the kind of loss of taste and smell, or if you have symptoms that might be more consistent with the Delta variant, which would be headache, sore throat, plus or minus fever and body aches, please talk to your doctor. Please see about getting tested. Even if you are fully vaccinated, we are seeing breakthrough infections. That doesn't mean the vaccines don't work. Breakthrough infections are to be expected with any vaccine. So even if you are vaccinated, if you are having symptoms, please discuss with your physician about whether or not they think that you should be tested, and get tested if possible. It's important that we identify as many cases as we can, because that helps us know what the prevalence of disease is in our community, and that helps us model and plan.
All right. That's it. Scott, thanks for being here.
I wouldn't miss it.
Amanda, thanks for being here as well.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Listeners, thank you for being here, because that's the reason we're here, is for you. Look forward. Next week, we'll have State Senator Julia Kurt on the show. And then I know we have a couple of others scheduled in coming weeks. I think in September, we'll have State Labor Secretary Leslie Osborne. And somewhere between now and then, we'll have the folks from Sally's List back on, Sarah Jane Rose and Alyssa. They were on the show, a couple of years ago, back when we were in an actual studio and didn't have to do it all online. And so we're excited to have them back. We're working to schedule some additional guests over the summer, in between, times that we're just standing in front of the open refrigerator to try to cool off. Okay. Scott's already done the whole closeout, so I'll just end by saying, remember that decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week.